songs, doing the little songs with you. Songs. It's about time we get our services, so we can get our songs up here on the projector. So good to see those that made it tonight. Welcome back to our first Wednesday night back. "316" is going to be our first song. 316.
In heaven they're singing a wonderful song, that theme that shall never grow old. And glorified millions are singing it now, in that beautiful city of gold. They're singing the songs of salvation, a story that never grows old. And glorified millions are singing it now, in that beautiful city of gold. We've read of its beauty, but somehow we know its glory has never been told. But think of the rapturous singing up there in that beautiful city of gold. They're singing the songs of salvation, a story that never grows old. And glorified millions are singing it now in that beautiful city of gold. What music we'll hear when the ransom of earth shall enter that heavenly fold. When all redeemed singers shall join in that song in that beautiful city of gold. They're singing the songs of salvation, a story that never grows old. And glorified millions are singing it now in that beautiful city of gold.
Number 55.
Beyond this land of parting, losing and leaving, far beyond the losses, darkening this land, far beyond the taking and the bereaving, lies the summer land of bliss. Land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is its light. Oh, happy summer land of bliss. Beyond this land of toiling, sowing and reaping, far beyond the shadows, darkening this land, far beyond the sighing, moaning and weeping, lies the summer land of bliss. Land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is its light. Oh, happy summer land of bliss. Beyond this land of waiting, sinking and sighing, far beyond the sorrows, darkening this land, far beyond the pain and sickness and dying, lies the summer land of bliss. Land beyond, so fair and bright, land beyond, where is no night, summer land, God is its light. Oh, happy summer land of bliss.
382. 382. Follow this song. We'll ask Brother Chip Phillips to lead us in a word of prayer.
Stand, please, for the witness tonight. Kneel at the cross, Christ will meet you there. He intercedes for you. Lift up your voice, sing with him your prayer, and begin life anew. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross, there is room for all who would his glory share. This fair awaits, armed in every fall, those who are anchored there. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross, give your idols up, look unto realms above. Turn not again to thy sparkling cup, trust always in his love. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there.
Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you at this time so thankful for this opportunity that you've given us to come together. We ask that you bless us in our efforts to come together and study your word, that we may be drawn closer to you, that we may be able to impart you to others, that we may gain them for you also. We ask that you be with us as a congregation, the things that we're involved in and in this community, and bless those efforts that we're putting forward. We ask you to be with this community and our nation and the world over. There's a lot of anxious people right now. We ask that you help us, guide our leaders, that they may make the decisions that would be our best interests. We ask you to be with us as we study your word tonight. Give us the lessons that we learned. Be with Bill as he leads our class. Be with us as students that we can gain the most out of this study. We ask that you forgive us of our sins when we fall short. Help us learn the lessons from those sins that we committed, that you've forgiven us of, that we can be better servants of yours. When you're through with us in this world, we ask for a home with you. This is our prayer in Christ's name.
Thing has been moved and all of that. It's ready to go. That's the big discipline that's all walk around with that.
Sweet. Scott? I'm supposed to leave 6 feet between me and everybody else. I think we're a little hot. And so we need to remember that, and I'll try to keep it down to we get it turned down here. Scott and I, we play with these things sometime, and he said he had it all set, said it may be too loud for me, and it was. That's better. Can everybody still hear now? Okay. Thank you. We are live streaming for the first time ever on Wednesday night, and so if you're listening, and let us know that you're there. It is, as Chip prayed, it is a scary time in a lot of different places. Arkansas is now on the state quarantine list. If you go to New York and New Jersey and places like that, you've got to quarantine for 14 days. And because their numbers are flat. I talked to BJ the other day, and of course they were made to stay in. I mean, they had to stay in. He was off work for the whole time up to about a couple of weeks ago, and their businesses were closed, and it wasn't an option. Wearing masks was part of the law, and you had to stay in. And because of that, now all their cases are leveled off, and they've come way down, and people are getting better and such like. It's the opposite with us, and so hopefully that will level off as well. And so I told you wrong Sunday. I looked in my files yesterday, started working and looking at it. And I had a file named "Start Here" when you meet again, or something like that. Because when I kept it laying on my desk for a long time and marked where we were at. I marked in my big Bible that I studied with back in the office, and where we were at. And then finally I saw we weren't going to come back anytime soon. And every week I used to say that it was so good, it'd be so good when we get back together again. And isn't it good that we're back together again on Wednesday night? It's terrific, isn't it? And so I came here, and usually on Wednesday afternoon, one time on our anniversary, I did it on a Tuesday, so we could be together on our anniversary. But I would come together, and I would tape it, and I would sit back there in that room and use the table that Tammy bought, use the light that they bought, and they added a little potted plant thing that they bought, and I would sit back there in that chair, and I would tape. And sometimes I would do it just once. Sometimes I would do it 4 or 5 times as far as getting started. And I think one time I did it 3 times, and that's because the computer messed up one time. And that's because I forgot to turn the sound on the second time, and the third time was a charm. And so, I mean, the time, again, I told you about this, but the time that I had the sound off and nobody heard, it was the best time that I'd ever done. I mean, I thought, man, and they couldn't hear it. You could have seen my lips move, but that was it. But anyway, no telling what y'all would have done with that. So it didn't see the light of day. It's probably back somewhere. But we're studying the book of Job. And what I wanted to do to start tonight is for us to kind of review. Johnny was kind of joking around with me the other day, and he said, you know, we haven't had class so long that you're going to have to spend 2 or 3 weeks just reviewing about who Job is and everything. And I don't think we'll take that long. I'm going to try to get through tonight. But I got news for you. You're back tonight, so you've been out of class for a while, and I'm one of those teachers that I want to see if you know what you have studied before. Who are we studying about? It's on the screen. Studying about Job, okay, in case you've forgotten. And so we've been studying this, but we're going to have a review and pop quiz all in one. Krista, you like a pop quiz, don't you? Yeah, no. Everybody likes pop quizzes. And I didn't do very good. But anyway, where was Job from according to Job 1:1? Answer without looking if you can. Where was he from? Uz. Okay. And we really don't know where Uz was. We talked about several different places. It could have been in the Euphrates Valley, in that area there. It could have been just anywhere. And so the land of Uz, Job 1 and verse 1. Okay, what 4 ways is Job described as being? 4 ways that he is described as being. If you had to describe Job, what would you describe him as? He was an honorary character. Isn't that right, George? No, he wasn't honorary. He was a righteous man. That would give one right there. Another one. He's what? Yeah, he was upright, and that's a form of righteousness. There you go. He was a man of integrity. He feared God. And one more. Starts with a B. Blameless. There you go. And so we had those. And here it is. And I think the King James says perfect. Maybe he was blameless or perfect. He was upright, a God-fearer, and one who are turned from evil. And so that was Job. Okay, next question. How many times in the book of Job is he described this way? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, how many think it was once? Think it was twice? Raise your hand. Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was twice. Reflected that, but yeah, I'm talking about the fourth thing. Yeah, 3 times. Yeah, 3 times. Did that how many kind you counted? Okay, I missed my own question, see? Yeah, 3 times, you're right. Well, Krista gets the head of the class so far. 1, 1, 1, 9, and 2, 3. Okay, I'm not looking, I need to look at my answer when I ask the question. But anyway, okay, you're doing good. What did Job do in chapter 1 to try to take care of his children spiritually? That's exactly right. He was offering sacrifices to them. There is some indication, or for them, there's some indication that probably they were kind of into the wine. And we see that later on in chapter 1. But when they would all get together, how many children were there? I don't have that question. 10. Okay, there were 10 children. And so when they would all get together and they were partying and things of this nature, after it was over with, Job would go and he would offer sacrifice. How many sacrifices did he offer? 1 for each one, and they were how many? That's how many sacrifices? 10. You get that, Leah? Okay. Yeah. And so there were 10 sacrifices there, and so that's good. And that's what he did. He offered sacrifices for them when their cycle of feasting was finished. Kind of sounded like they just got together and had a party for a while, didn't it? And then when it was done, he goes down and he offered sacrifices to them. You know, we can't do that for our children. We know sometimes that maybe they're away doing things they shouldn't do because they're away from home now, and we have no control over them. They might be far away doing things they shouldn't do, but we still need to pray for them. We still need to pray that God will show them the way, and that God will bring them back, and that they'll be saved. But, you know, I mean, that was something for Job had to do. We don't know when Job was written. We think it was probably written in the patriarchal age, but we know about sacrifices, and they'd offer sacrifices a lot. And it was a blood sacrifice. Well, with a blood sacrifice, you had to kill something. You had to drain the blood. And you had to get messy, and you had to get dirty and smelly. And it cost you something. In the Old Testament, it cost you your best lamb, or your best bull, or your best goat. And just imagine Job doing that for 10 times. And wondering, you know, did it do any good? Okay, I had to look and see the answer. What was the frequency of him offering sacrifices? Every time they partied. Yep. It was regularly and continually. Every time that they would do this, he kept doing it. And so he was a father that was worrying about it. Y'all doing real good. what were the first two questions Satan asked about Job in chapter 1? There's two questions that he asked in chapter 1. Yeah, I think you're right. Johnny? Did you say something, or was that somebody else? Chip? That's it. One of them. I can get close to Inez. I'm all right there. So, did you fear God for nothing? For not, I think maybe one translation says. Then what was the next question he asked right after that? I think that's what Nancy said. Okay, Job 1:9-10. So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" What's Satan getting at? What's he trying to do? Is he poking at God a little bit? Yeah, poking at God, you know. And, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, everything's fine with him. Does he fear you for nothing? And what's fear here? Is it respect, worship, fear, or all of those? I think it's all of those, you know. And so we see that. And then the next thing that was said in verse 10, and again, poking at God a little bit. Have you made a hedge around him and around his household? And this struck me today as I was getting it, so listen very closely. Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, around all that he has on every side? Does that kind of clear things up for you when we're going to talk about the attack that Satan made against him? Because what did he come after? All of these. Every one of them. And so, you know, here he's thinking, I've got this, you know, you've protected him. And more than that, you've blessed the work of his hands. And his possessions have increased in the land. In other words, it's going up to what Satan finally said. If you afflict Job, he'll curse you and die. Or he'll curse you. Okay, any more comments? Okay, I think that's, you know, leading up to that, and that's important. Okay. This is name the calamities that befell Job in chapters 1 through 2. When you sit down and enumerate them, there are 4 of these. What? His oxen. Okay. His oxen. And, yeah, all his kids died. That's the last one. Yeah, his camels. And then what? You mentioned it. It was sheep. So you had, and here's the answer. The Sabaeans attacked the servants who were plowing in the field, so the oxen and donkeys. How many servants escaped? Only one. Okay, very good. 2. Fire came from God and burned sheep and servants. How many escaped? Only one. 3. The Chaldeans came and raided the camels and killed the servants. How many escaped? Only one. And 4. Sons and daughters all died when a wind destroyed their house. And how many escaped to tell Job about it? Now the only? Yeah, one servant. The kids died, all 10 of them. Now, you think about that. Really, there's 5 because one's on the next thing. Okay, what's the 5th one? What other calamities befell? Sword. Did they cover everything, or was they just in one little spot? Cover everything, didn't they? From the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. And talk to Jane back there, Sister Willine's got some blisters that are breaking out. Very rare thing that's been happening to her. They just break out at random. And she would really be tormented if they were everywhere. She's tormented enough as it is. And so just think and think about what happened to Job. And whoever taught you Job back there did a good job. You know that. You taught that, huh? There you go. And that's a good job. And then that's what happened. Now, I was thinking when I was getting this up and writing this down today, that again, you go back and God talks about, or Satan talked about how blessed Job was. And now he's left with how many servants? 4 that we know of. He's left with how many livestock and things of that? Zip. None. How many children to say, well, I've got these children? None. Can you imagine losing all of that? And again, it wasn't 1 month apart. It wasn't a week apart. It wasn't even a day apart. The way we see it and the way we read it, how close was they to one another? Boom, 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 boom. The phrase appears, and as he was speaking, somebody else came. And the last one was, or number 4, was the most devastating of all. Job, did you think he really cared about his livestock after that? No, his sons and his daughters were dead. They were gone. And so you had that. Y'all doing real good in getting the balls. Okay. Okay. I think you're right. Johnny asked, was it Satan accusing God of saying, paying Job to be loyal to him? He was indicating something like that, wasn't he? Yeah. See, I mean, he thought he had it all figured out because he thought if he could get God to afflict Job, Satan would quit. I mean, Job would quit him. Did he have it all figured out, or was he 100% wrong? He was 100% wrong. Again, we'll talk. We're moving along now. We talked about all those, and then Job covered what was Job's response when he lost everything in chapter 1. He praised God. He fell down and he praised God. And it's very important to note that. In fact, if you want to look at the text, it's in chapter 1, verse 20. Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head. That was a sign of what? Grief and intense mourning. That's what they did. So Job arose and he tore his robe, shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshiped. I like that. I mean, he fell to the ground and worshiped. What do people tend to do in situations like that usually? Yeah, blame God. Get mad and get angry at God and point your finger at God. I'll never forget, and I think this is, I don't think it's changed. I wish it would have. We had a young boy that had a wreck in dirt roads right behind his house in a Ford Bronco that he wasn't supposed to be driving, but he kept egging his mom, please let me drive it. She gave in and flipped over somewhere on that dirt road. Was out there on the dirt road for nobody knows how long before somebody found him By the time the helicopter got there and all of that, nobody knows how long, his brain had been starved of oxygen. He lived. I went down, I found out about it, jumped in the car, drove down to the Med in Memphis, and spent all night down there just about with the family. And I was talking to his dad, who was unfaithful for some time, but now was a faithful member of the church again. And his dad's statement was me, I don't know why God did this to me and didn't take my life earlier. And he was referencing a wreck that he'd had really earlier in life that almost killed him, did a lot of damage. And to this day, I hope it's changed, but this day probably he hasn't been back to church. And you try to answer somebody like that. I can tell you the answer I gave, It didn't do any good. But Job was the exact opposite of that. And I don't know how I would have been. I don't know how you would have been. We'd like to think, oh, I'd be just like Job. I don't know. We say that. George? Yeah. I think that's important. What did Miss Job ask him after he got sick? Yeah. Ask him something about an I word, though. Yeah. Do you still have your integrity? And then when you said, won't you just curse God and die? I guess you're saying, why don't you just lose it? I really don't know about that question. Do you still have your integrity? What did Job maintain all through the book that he had? I looked it up. Integrity. It's mentioned over and over and over again in the book of Job. And this was his response. Or what was Job's response when she told him to curse God and die? Wasn't very good. He said in verse 10, the English Standard Version, he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. How many of us said that to our wives? Probably not a one of us, because they would probably whop us upside the head. But we see that, he turns to her and says, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. And then he asks the question, shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? In all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. Okay, this is a vital point. This again hit me today as I was reviewing. Where's the problem in that verse? There's a problem in that verse that is a preconceived conception that everybody in this book is going to have. And God gives evil to us. That is the perceived thing. Who did all this to us? Satan. And yet a lot of times we will say, God, why did you give me cancer? God, why did you put my family up? God, why did you look like this? God, why did you do this? And we think he didn't do it. We really worked. But I thought, this is where they really start messing up. Job in his mind is already not necessarily blame God, but he did what? This came from God. And people do the same thing today. Now, was he partly right? Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because, again, the three friends, Elihu and Job, for the most part, who are they going to look directly to cause that to happen? They look to God, don't they? Yeah. God did this, and so that's why it happened. Okay, let's move on, and we'll get to where we're going to start, maybe. Name name Job's three friends without looking. Who? Okay, they were Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. Okay, those three. Eliphaz, I think, was a Temite. I forget what Bildad was, and you had Zophar. They came from afar. One translation says after they had made an appointment with Job, they came to visit him. And so again, we've talked about, how long did this take place? We really don't know. As we said, they lived off. They had to travel. They had to get the news, and then they had to make preparations. They had to make sure it was all right, and then they traveled. We've already talked about this. Why did they think Job must have done evil? What was their argument that you've done evil? That's right. Look at all that's happened to you. You must have messed up. And that was it. Okay. Well, I already answered one question, but anyway, that's what happened. That's a bonus question. During all this, Job maintained his what? We already talked about it. Integrity. List some of the sins they accused Job of in chapters 4 through 22. If you don't know what these chapters are, Elihu starts in chapter 4. They keep on talking several chapters. That is right, I think. Maybe more than 22, but I think that's right. What are some of the sins? You don't have time to look them all up, but this stop and think in your mind. Go back to some of the things that they charge. That should be 32. No, that's 22, I think. Some of the things that they charge Job of. Okay, women. Is that what you said? What else? Huh? Yeah, you persecuted the poor. You were greedy. Yeah, now let's just look at them. They accused him of stealing, and these are the ones I can think of. They accused him of defrauding people of their land. How did he do that? They accused him of doing what? Removing the ancient landmarks. So, mistreating children, mistreating his servants. Remember, they said, you got these servants over here, you mistreated them. Mistreating the poor, and that was a real bad sin. And the poor and their children, I think, is pointed. Sexual sins. And, Job said, look, I've made a covenant with his what? Eyes. He said, look, I made my covenant with my eyes that I don't lust. And on and on. And so all of this, Job maintained his integrity. Who is the new character we introduced in chapter 32, and why did it take us so long to meet him? Elihu. And why did it take us so long to meet him? He kept quiet. And so there's his name, and I answered the next question, but anyway. He was waiting for 3 friends to finish interrogating Job. Is interrogating a good word there? That's what they did to him, wasn't it? What did you do? What did you do? And they kept on, and they kept on, and they kept on. What is Elihu's disposition when we first meet him? If you didn't know any of the questions, you got 2 right because I messed up. He was really, really, really mad. And the word is furious. He was wrathful or mad. And there are a lot of reasons. And why was he furious? I just got to this and I just lost all my animation. But anyway, he was mad because he justified himself before God. Job did. He was mad at the 3 friends because they could not answer or convict Job and yet condemned him. And he was mad because they quit trying. I mean, when they reached that stalemate, when Job said his part, the 3 friends said his part, Elihu had enough. And so here it is. Why did Elihu finally speak according to 18:1? For I am full of words, and the Spirit within me controls me. He's saying, I've got something to say. Have you ever been in a situation to where you had something to say, but it wasn't time to say it, and yet it kept building up and building up and building up, And finally you said, I can't stand it, and I stood what I stood, and I can't stand it no longer, like Papa, somewhere like that. And he breaks out the spinach. Elihu is saying, look, I can't wait anymore. I've got to tell you what I'm thinking. My belly is like wine that has no vent, like wineskin, new wineskin, ready to burst. Remember what Jesus, I think it was Jesus talked about, what do you do? Where do you put new wine at? Well, old wineskins, isn't it? Okay, I thought it was the other way around. I have to look at that. No, but anyway, he watched that, and so we see the convert. I've got to speak. And then he says, 20, I must speak that I may find relief. Go ahead. Yeah. Sometimes when we deal with people, we just want to kind of ease, He was ready to set them straight. And he said that I may find relief, I must open my lips and answer. Okay, and this is getting to where we need to be. This is maybe my last slide. Chapter 32, I went back and I read these this morning. I got my Bible out and I sat on the love seat, or my office at home, which is our dining room, I guess, that we use as my office. And I read chapter 32, or really all of these. And then I came back out and looked at them again today because I was trying to figure out Elihu's introduction and reasoning and statement of the problem is in chapter 32. He states, the problem y'all just gave up too easy. You didn't answer him. Job didn't answer him. There's a problem. He's claiming he's righteous and he's really not. Chapter 33, Elihu claims to be God's spokesman, and he does. God spoke to me. Kind of like Eliphaz, I think it was, that did. And he lists the main complaints and answers those complaints. And then chapter 34 is more of the same, with Elihu defends God's justice. So next week, since we're all up, and I wanted to kind of have this fresh in mind, because when we get to chapter 38, we're going to start listening to God. And so I wanted us to kind of set the stage again. I'm glad we did and glad you're here. Okay, we'll start chapter 35 next week. And I did something wrong with the song's Rock of Ages. But anyway, the numbers are gone.
Text hanging up my phone now, but it's out there, and I think one thing that this is helping with the live stream is that we're helping people like Sister Betty Coles, who's not able to be out